Emperor Haile Selassie was crowned Emperor of Ethiopia in 1930. However, before the coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie in 1930, there were some key events. So people in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, were brought there. They were Africans who came over to Jamaica. They were taken from Africa, from mainly West Africa, and brought to the Caribbean during the transatlantic slave trade. Now, during the transatlantic slave trade, and it wasn't just Jamaica, it was various islands in the Caribbean and also America as well. But I'm highlighting Jamaica because that's significant in the Rastafari movement. Now, in terms of Jamaica, and the Africans that were brought there, they had lost their identity, culture, and heritage, which had been brainwashed out of them through slavery, through what happened to them. So the damage was not only just physical, and whether it was the labour or the ill treatment, it was also very mental as well. So even when slavery ended, the minds of our people were still very much colonised, because you need to remember that Britain were ruling the Caribbean, Jamaica, for the last 400 years. So in the 1930s, when Rastafari really emerged, it was still a British colony up until 1962. So during this time, there was ones that came about that were trying to uplift the minds of black people, and get them to really to reclaim their African heritage. And one of the people that was significant was Marcus Garvey. Now, Marcus Garvey, he established an organisation called the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. Now, in that organisation, there was various different businesses. Marcus Garvey himself, he produced he was a printing company, and they produced the Negro World newspaper. They also had a factory where they made dolls, steam laundry shops, coffee shops, and various different other businesses. The UNIA had millions of different followers throughout the whole world, whether it was in the Caribbean, Europe, on the continent of Africa itself. It had various different followers, and it was aimed at the upliftment of African people of African heritage, culturally, politically, economically, and spiritually. Now, Marcus Garvey, in terms of Rastafari, is regarded as a prophet, and one of the reasons for this is that he was the one who highlighted that the need for black people to look towards Africa for the crowning of a black king to be the liberator of African people. And Marcus Garvey spoke about black people seeing the image of God or divinity within our own race. So in the philosophies and opinions of Marcus Garvey, there's a chapter, there's a section where he talks about that if the white man are going to worship a white god, let them be it. If the other people are going to worship a god in their colour, they can do that, but we as African people need to worship God in our image. Yeah, so he was highlighting the need for African people to look to a god or a king in our own image. And there's various different sources where Marcus Garvey hinted towards looking towards Africa. He made a play in 1930 in Jamaica, and produced a play. And at the end of the play, there was a crowning of an African. It was a coronation of an African king. It's also claimed that he said the words, "Look to Africa for a king to be crowned. He shall be your redeemer." And Garvey used to quote Psalms. He used to say, "Ethiopia shall stretch forth its hand unto God." So Garvey had been basically pointing African people towards a king, a redeemer from Africa, which leads up to the 1930s, when Emperor Haile Selassie was crowned Emperor of Ethiopia. Now, that was very significant because Ethiopia, till this day, has never been colonized. Not only has Ethiopia never been colonized, Emperor Haile Selassie was the only emperor on the continent of Ethiopia during that time. During that time, a lot of the countries in Africa were being colonized by, whether it was by various different countries in Europe. Yeah, so Haile Selassie, what he symbolized as the black man on its highest level in its heritage, culture. Haile Selassie is a man who traveled to throughout the world to various different countries. Even the Queen of England had to bow to His Majesty. So Haile Selassie was very, very important in symbolizing African independence and that redemptive energy that was portrayed. So that's why ones like, say, Leonard Howell, Archibald Dunkley, Robert Hines, and Joseph Hibbert decided to declare Emperor Haile Selassie as the Redeemer that Marcus Garvey had been talking about. Also, there were some of the Rastafarians at the time. They were members of they were Garveyites, so they're coming out of Marcus Garvey's organisation. They also referred to books such as the Holy Bibi, the Black Man's Bible, and the Royal Parchment Scroll of Black Supremacy, which had been hinting towards a king from Ethiopia, a king or god from Ethiopia, to come and to liberate black people out of a system which was oppressing them and still oppressing them, a system of white supremacy, which they were really fighting against at the time. There's also reference to the Haile Selassie, which can be validated where some Rastafarians use the Bible as validation. So a lot of the early Rastafarians, because they were coming out of Christianity, they used the Bible to validate Haile Selassie's lineage to Solomon and Sheba. And when Haile Selassie was crowned, he was crowned King of Kings, Lords of Lords, conquering Lion of the tribe was Judah. And there's various different points that they related to Haile Selassie, using the Bible as their validation source. Moving on now to the 1940s, and you have Leonard Howell, who I mentioned was one of the founders of Rastafari, is one of the most prominent, is probably the most known out of the four early founders of Rastafari that I mentioned. Leonard Howell built a land called Pinnacle, and that land, Pinnacle, was built in Jamaica. It was based on 500 acres of land, and it was a community of Rastafarians that lived on the land, and they were very skilled craftsmen, tradesmen, and they lived together there in relative harmony. Pinnacle was one of the most economically empowered communities in Jamaica, and Leonard Howell himself used to give money to a lot of the proceeds, the money that was left over, to poor people in Jamaica that was suffering on the streets. So that's a bit of information about Leonard Howell and Pinnacle. Now, in going into the 50s and the 1950s, you have some significant events that took place. Pinnacle, as I just mentioned, was raided several times, and Pinnacle in the 1950s demised following the police, the government. They went to Pinnacle, they raided Pinnacle, and they burnt the houses. They burnt the houses down. So that led to a lot of Rastafarians dispersing to different places. Also in the 1950s, the Kenyans, images of the Kenyans who were fighting independence from the British, and they Kenyans used to have dreadlocks on their hair. So a lot of Rastafarians then adopted the dreadlocks from the Kenyan, the Mau Mau warriors who were fighting against the British. Up until that point, the majority of Rastafarians didn't have dreadlocks. So if you look at, say, Haile Selassie, Garvey, Leonard Howell, the early followers and founders of the Rastafari movement, they didn't have dreadlocks relatively up until that point. And then also there came in the validation of the dreadlocks through the Bible in terms of the people that followed Jesus, the Nazarites, they had dreadlocks as well. Yeah. In the 50s, you also have the Bobo Shanti that emerged. Prior to that, you had the Nyabingi, and then prior to that, you had the Howellites, who were the followers of Leonard Howell. So that happened in the 50s. The Bobo Shanti, they believe in like a trial when they look at Marcus Garvey, Haile Selassie, and Holy Emmanuel, Charles Edwards, in a Trinity perspective, where they're all divine. Whereas the Nyabingi, they solely focus on Emperor Haile Selassie. Going into the 60s, Jamaica's independent in 1962. Then you have 1963. the Coral Gardens massacre, which took place following an incident in Montego Bay, Jamaica. The Prime Minister at the time, Sir Alexander Bustamante, he put in a verdict to kill all Rastafarians. So he said, bring in all Rastas, dead or alive. And if the prison can't hold them, throw them on Bogel, which is a cemetery in Jamaica. So because of the Coral Gardens incident, a lot of Rastafarians were killed, massacred, beaten up, went to prison, put in prison under false charges or ridiculous charges, and then stayed in prison for quite some time after that. So that was a atrocity that happened, and in the book it highlights the Coral Gardens massacre and obviously what happened in Pinnacle, because Rastafarian throughout since it really began in 1930s has faced persecution, whether it's just walking through the streets of Jamaica and getting their dreadlocks cut off, even throughout in the 70s, 80s hair, people's parents even disowning them for treading this path of life. So Rasta's really been persecuted a lot along the way. Now, in 1966, another key point is you have the Haile Selassie coming to Jamaica in 1966. Now, that's very crucial because that is the first and only time that Haile Selassie visited Jamaica. Yeah. Now, in Jamaica is the land where it was where Haile Selassie was declared first as the redeemer for black people. So him coming to Jamaica, this was like the first time that Rastafarians were able to actually see him in person. Yeah, so they actually was able to see the man that they regarded as their Messiah directly in person. And Haile Selassie was very receptive to Rastafarians. He gave them medallions and he told them to organise and centralise and continue the works that they was doing. Haile Selassie, when he visited Jamaica, he also donated money for them to build the Haile Selassie High School in Jamaica. And he also extended Jamaica to become a member of the Organisation of African Unity as well. So that's and throughout the 3 days that Haile Selassie spent in Jamaica, he travelled up and down the islands, and there was various different ceremonies that took place all over Jamaica during Haile Selassie's visit. Going on now into the 60s, then you have the 12 tribes of Israel that formed in the 60s. Prophet Gad, Vernon Carrington formed the 12 tribes of Israel, and the 12 tribes of Israel, they regard Haile Selassie to be a reincarnation of Jesus Christ, and they use the Bible to validate that, and they believe that we are part of the lost 12 tribes of Israel. Going into the 70s now. In the 70s, you have the rise of reggae music. Reggae very, very popular in the 70s because of people like Bob Marley, Burning Spear, Freddie McGregor, Gregory Isaacs. The most popular out of those be Bob Marley. In a lot of Bob Marley songs, he sang about the messages of Rastafari. So he talked about where he sang songs Selassie's Chapel, Babylon System, Africa Unite, Rastaman Chant. Peter Tosh as well, also significant. I remember one song that Peter Tosh sung about called Identity, when he says that no matter where you're born from, you have the identity of an African. And that's very significant into what the message of Rastafari is about, because Rastafari is a Pan-African movement where we say that we are unapologetically African and that we should have love for African brothers and sisters. So very, very important. Burning Spear sung songs about slavery. One song he sung was about Marcus Garvey throughout the whole song. Very, very inspirational as well. And up until this day, reggae music is still inspirational through artists like Tyrus Riley, Jacquier, Luciana, Damian Marley. So reggae music is still maintain that platform for Rastafari and propagating the message of Rastafari, definitely. Also, you have not only reggae music in the 70s. The 70s was also important because there was a lot of discrimination that black people were facing here in England, during the 70s. So a lot of the communities in England, the consciousness was really Rastafari really helped to keep a lot of black communities together, and wherever you went, for example, whether it was in London, Southampton, or the Midlands, it was common to see Rastafarians. I remember speaking to a Rastafarian. I remember speaking to an elder, and she was like, Rastafari was so prominent in the 70s, 80s. Like in West London, it was like every other African on road was a Rastafarian. Yeah, I remember speaking to another elder, and she told me that whenever that she used to go and see, whenever she saw a Rastafarian and she wanted to go anything, she always felt safe. Yeah, so these are some of the positive contributions that Rastafari has made. And I wanted to highlight it just now as well in my book, is that you don't have to be a Rastafarian to read the book or to understand or respect Rastafari, because what Rastafari has contributed in preserving so much of the African culture, heritage and traditions, it needs to be respected regardless of whatever religion or background you come from. Whether it is and things that Rastafari has helped us reclaim, whether it's like the drumming, for example, like the Nyabingi drums, or even if it's the loxing and the understanding of, you have the ancient Egypts that had locks, and the fact that a lot of people didn't like the natural hair, and decided to go back and start loxing up their hair because they were proud to be African. And whether it's reggae music, whether they were fighting in Zimbabwe when they were fighting to get independence, and it was the music of the likes of Bob Marley and the reggae music that inspired the Zimbabweans fighting the war. So Rastafari has contributed so much, as I just mentioned, in the 70s in England, in really holding a lot of the communities together. And we've seen that as Rastafari has become less popular, how cohesion in the community, black communities in England, has kind of followed as well. And it's not as Rastafari has become less popular, so the black community has kind of gone down in the same kind of aspect. It's not as strong as it used to be.
Interesting vibration. You're lucky to the A1 station. That's how we do it. You know, see the youth just roll and go and roll and go and roll, you know. You might roll and roll, you know. Non-stop, you know, spiritual improvisation. That's when you know when somebody have the spirit and have the vibe and have the conviction, you know what I mean, and the seriousness and the determination in what they might deal with. And we really give thanks for that, and that's why you see the Galaxy with there. We give the platform for the younger generation to express themselves, exercise that freedom of speech and exercise that freedom of expression, inform, educate, stimulate our people. Relevant knowledge for relevant people. Don't give away what is not relevant, because our people need liberating, and it's relevant knowledge, history of self. So I hope so the item locking and edifying and taking the vibration as we come in. Just again, just land with some closing comments, please, brothers McConnell, to our listening audience before we seal off the last furlong of the show.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, anyone who wants to get a copy of my book, The Rise of Rastafari, it's available on eBay. If you just write The Rise of Rastafari, you search it, write The Rise of Rastafari, it will come up and you can purchase a copy of my book. Or if you would like to contact me, you can contact and get a copy of the book. You can contact me on 079 43 178 117. That is 079 43 178 117.
Give thanks again, originally every time. Makanam Sankofa, Nubian Beat Show, Galaxy, Afuwi.com is the only D-Brain washing station. Give thanks, Young Prince.